Welcome to the world of beautiful cities. Never miss a chance to visit them. Amsterdam is the capital and most populous city of the Netherlands. Found within the province of North Holland, Amsterdam is colloquially referred to as the Venice of the North, attributed by the large number of canals which form a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Amsterdam was founded at the Amstel, that was dammed to control flooding. The city's name derives from the Amstel Dam. Originating as a small fishing village in the late 12th century, Amsterdam became one of the most important ports in the world during the Dutch Golden Age of the 17th century, and became the leading center for finance and trade. In the 19th and 20th centuries, the city expanded and many new neighborhoods and suburbs were planned and built. The 17th century canals of Amsterdam and the 20th century defense line of Amsterdam are on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Sloten, annexed in 1921 by the municipality of Amsterdam, is the oldest part of the city, dating to the 9th century. Amsterdam's main attractions include its historic canals, the Rijksmuseum, the Van Gogh Museum, the Stedelijk Museum, Hermitage Amsterdam, the Concertgebouw, the Anne Frank House, the Scheepvaart Museum, the Amsterdam Museum, the Heineken Experience, the Royal Palace of Amsterdam, Natura Artis Magistra, Hortus Botanicus Amsterdam, Nemo, the Red Light District and many cannabis coffee shops. It drew more than 5 million international visitors in 2014. The city is also well known for its nightlife and festival activity, with several of its nightclubs among the world's most famous. Primarily known for its artistic heritage, elaborate canal system and narrow houses with gabled facades, well-preserved legacies of the city's 17th century golden age. These characteristics are arguably responsible for attracting millions of Amsterdam's visitors annually. Cycling is key to the city's character, and there are numerous bike paths. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange is considered the oldest modern securities market stock exchange in the world. As the commercial capital of the Netherlands and one of the top financial centers in Europe, Amsterdam is considered an Alpha World City by the Globalization and World City Study Group. The city is also the cultural capital of the Netherlands. Many large Dutch institutions have their headquarters in the city, including the Philips conglomerate, AkzoNobel, Booking.com, TomTom, and ING. Moreover, many of the world's largest companies are based in Amsterdam, or have established their European headquarters in the city, such as leading technology companies Uber, Netflix and Tesla. In 2012, Amsterdam was ranked the second best city to live in by the Economist Intelligence Unit, and 12th globally on quality of living for environment and infrastructure by Mercer. The city was ranked 4th place globally as top tech hub in the Savills Tech Cities 2019 report, and 3rd in innovation by Australian innovation agency 2thinknow in their Innovation Cities Index 2009. The Port of Amsterdam is the 5th largest in Europe. The KLM hub and Amsterdam's main airport, Schiphol, is the Netherlands' busiest airport, as well as the 3rd busiest in Europe and 11th busiest airport in the world. The Dutch capital is considered one of the most multicultural cities in the world, with at least 177 nationalities represented. A few of Amsterdam's notable residents throughout history include painters Rembrandt and Van Gogh, the diarist Anne Frank, and philosopher Baruch Spinoza. Prehistory. Due to its geographical location in what used to be wet peatland, the founding of Amsterdam is of a younger age than the founding of other urban centers in the Low Countries. However, in and around the area of what later became Amsterdam, local farmers settled as early as 3 millennia ago. They lived along the prehistoric IJ River and upstream of its tributary Amstel. The prehistoric IJ was a shallow and quiet stream in peatland behind beach ridges. This secluded area could grow there into an important local settlement center, especially in the Late Bronze Age, the Iron Age and the Roman Age. Neolithic and Roman artifacts have also been found in the south of this area, in the prehistoric Amstel bedding under Amsterdam's Damrak and Rokin, such as shards of Belbeker culture pottery and a granite grinding stone. But the location of these artifacts around the river banks of the Amstel probably point to a presence of a modest semi-permanent or seasonal settlement of the previous mentioned local farmers. A permanent settlement would not have been possible, since the river mouth and the banks of the Amstel in this period in time were too wet for permanent habitation. Etymology and founding. The origins of Amsterdam is linked to the development of the peatland called Amerstel, meaning watery area, from Aam river plus stel site at a shoreline, river bank. In this area, land reclamation started as early as the late 10th century. Amerstel was located along a side arm of the IJ. This side arm took the name from the eponymous land, Amstel. Amerstel was inhabited by farmers, who lived more inland and more upstream, where the land was not as wet as at the banks of the downstream river mouth. These farmers were starting the reclamation around upstream Ouderkerk, Eender Amstel, and later at the other side of the river at Amstelveen. The Van Amstel family, known in documents by this name since 1019, held the stewardship in this northwestern nook of the ecclesiastical district of the Bishop of Utrecht. The family later served also under the Count of Holland. A major turning point in the development of the Amstel River mouth is the All Saints flood of 1170. In an extremely short period of time, the shallow river IJ turned into a wide estuary, which from then on offered the Amstel an open connection to the Zuiderzee, IJssel and waterways further afield. This made the water flow of the Amstel more active, so excess water could be drained better. With drier banks, the downstream Amstel mouth became attractive for permanent habitation. Moreover, the river had grown from an insignificant peat stream into a junction of international waterways. A settlement was built here immediately after the landscape change of 1170, and right from the start of its foundation it focused on traffic, production and trade, not on farming, as opposed to how communities had lived further upstream for the past 200 years and northward for thousands of years. The construction of a dam at the mouth of the Amstel, eponymously named Dam, is historically estimated to have occurred between 1264 and 1275. The settlement first appeared in a document concerning a road toll granted by the Count of Holland Floris V to the residents Apper de Mestellerdam, at the dam in the Amstel, or at the Dam of Amstelland. This allowed the inhabitants of the village to travel freely through the county of Holland, paying no tolls at bridges, locks and dams. By 1327, the name had developed into Amsterdam. Middle Ages. Amsterdam was granted city rights in either 1300 or 1306. From the 14th century on, Amsterdam flourished, largely from trade with the Hanseatic League. In 1345, an alleged Eucharistic miracle in Kalverstraat rendered the city an important place of pilgrimage, until the adoption of the Protestant faith. The miracle devotion went underground, but was kept alive. In the 19th century, especially after the Jubilee of 1845, the devotion was revitalized and became an important national point of reference for Dutch Catholics. The Stille Omgang, a silent walk or procession in civil attire, is the expression of the pilgrimage within the Protestant Netherlands since the late 19th century. In the heyday of the silent walk, up to 90,000 pilgrims came to Amsterdam. In the 21st century, this has reduced to about 5,000. Conflict with Spain. In the 16th century, the Dutch rebelled against Philip II of Spain and his successors. The main reasons for the uprising were the imposition of new taxes, the 10th penny, and the religious persecution of Protestants by the newly introduced Inquisition. The revolt escalated into the 80 Years' War, which ultimately led to Dutch independence. Strongly pushed by Dutch revolt leader William the Silent, the Dutch Republic became known for its relative religious tolerance. Jews from the Iberian Peninsula, Huguenots from France, prosperous merchants and printers from Flanders, and economic and religious refugees from the Spanish-controlled parts of the Low Countries found safety in Amsterdam. The influx of Flemish printers and the city's intellectual tolerance made Amsterdam a center for the European free press. Center of the Dutch Golden Age. The 17th century is considered Amsterdam's golden age, during which it became the wealthiest city in the Western world. Ships sailed from Amsterdam to the Baltic Sea, North America, and Africa, as well as present-day Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka, and Brazil, forming the basis of a worldwide trading network. Amsterdam's merchants had the largest share in both the Dutch East India Company and the Dutch West India Company. These companies acquired overseas possessions that later became Dutch colonies. Amsterdam was Europe's most important point for the shipment of goods, and was the leading financial center of the Western world. In 1602, the Amsterdam office of the International Trading Dutch East India Company became the world's first stock exchange by trading in its own shares. The Bank of Amsterdam started operations in 1609, acting as a full-service bank for Dutch merchant bankers, and as a reserve bank. Decline and modernization. Amsterdam's prosperity declined during the 18th and early 19th centuries. The wars of the Dutch Republic with England and France took their toll on Amsterdam. During the Napoleonic Wars, Amsterdam's significance reached its lowest point, with Holland being absorbed into the French Empire. However, the later establishment of the United Kingdom of the Netherlands in 1815 marked a turning point. The end of the 19th century is sometimes called Amsterdam's Second Golden Age. New museums, a railway station, and the Concertgebouw were built. In this same time, the Industrial Revolution reached the city. The Amsterdam-Rhine Canal was dug to give Amsterdam a direct connection to the Rhine, and the North Sea Canal was dug to give the port a shorter connection to the North Sea. Both projects dramatically improved commerce with the rest of Europe and the world. In 1906, Joseph Conrad gave a brief description of Amsterdam as seen from the seaside, in the Mirror of the Sea. 20th century to present. Shortly before the First World War, the city started to expand again, and new suburbs were built. Even though the Netherlands remained neutral in this war, Amsterdam suffered a food shortage, and heating fuel became scarce. The shortages sparked riots in which several people were killed. These riots are known as the Aardappelenproeven. People started looting stores and warehouses in order to get supplies, mainly food. On the 1st of January 1921, after a flood in 1916, the depleted municipalities of Durgedam, Holisloot, Zunderdorp and Schellingwoude, all lying north of Amsterdam, were, at their own request, annexed to the city. Between the wars, the city continued to expand, most notably to the west of the Jordaan district in the Frederick Hendrikbuurt and surrounding neighborhoods. Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands on the 10th of May 1940 and took control of the country. Some Amsterdam citizens sheltered Jews, thereby exposing themselves and their families to a high risk of being imprisoned or sent to concentration camps. More than 100,000 Dutch Jews were deported to Nazi concentration camps, of whom some 60,000 lived in Amsterdam. In response, the Dutch Communist Party organized the February strike attended by 300,000 people to protest against the raids. Perhaps the most famous deportee was the young Jewish girl Anne Frank, who died in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. At the end of the Second World War, communication with the rest of the country broke down, and food and fuel became scarce. Many citizens traveled to the countryside to forage. Many trees in Amsterdam were cut down for fuel, and wood was taken from the houses, apartments and other buildings of deported Jews. Many new suburbs, such as Osdorp, Slotervaart, Slotermeer and Juizenveld, were built in the years after the Second World War. These suburbs contained many public parks and wide open spaces, and the new buildings provided improved housing conditions with larger and brighter rooms, gardens, and balconies. Because of the war and other events of the 20th century, almost the entire city center had fallen into disrepair. There was an increasing demand for office buildings, and also for new roads, as the automobile became available to most people. A metro started operating in 1977 between the new suburb of Bijlmermeer in the city's Zuidoost exclave and the center of Amsterdam. Further plans were to build a new highway above the metro to connect Amsterdam Central and the city center with other parts of the city. The required large-scale demolitions began in Amsterdam's former Jewish neighborhood. Smaller streets, such as the Jodenbriestraat and Weesperstraat, were widened and almost all houses and buildings were demolished. At the peak of the demolition, the Nieuwmarktrellen broke out. The rioters expressed their fury about the demolition caused by the restructuring of the city. As a result, the demolition was stopped and the highway into the city's center was never fully built. Only the metro was completed. Only a few streets remained widened. The new City Hall was built on the almost completely demolished Waterlooplein. Meanwhile, large private organizations, such as Stadsschuurstede Amsterdam, were founded to restore the entire city center. Although the success of this struggle is visible today, efforts for further restoration are still ongoing. The entire city center has reattained its former splendor, and as a whole, is now a protected area. Many of its buildings have become monuments, and in July 2010 the Grachtengordel was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List. In the 21st century, the Amsterdam city center has attracted large numbers of tourists. Between 2012 and 2015, the annual number of visitors rose from 10 to 17 million. Real estate prices have surged, and local shops are making way for tourist-oriented ones, making the center unaffordable for the city's inhabitants. These developments have evoked comparisons with Venice, a city thought to be overwhelmed by the tourist influx. Construction of a new metro line connecting the part of the city north of the IJ to its southern part was started in 2003. The new metro line was completed in 2018. Since 2014, renewed focus has been given to urban regeneration and renewal, especially in areas directly bordering the city center, such as Frederik Hendrikbuurt. This urban renewal and expansion of the traditional center of the city, with the construction on artificial islands of the new Eastern Ijeburg neighborhood, is part of the Structural Vision Amsterdam 2040 initiative. Geography. Amsterdam is located in the western Netherlands, in the province of North Holland, the capital of which is not Amsterdam, but rather Haarlem. The River Amstel ends in the city center, and connects to a large number of canals that eventually terminate in the IJ. Amsterdam is about 2 meters below sea level. The surrounding land is flat, as it is formed of large polders. A man-made forest, Amsterdam's Bos, is in the southwest. Amsterdam is connected to the North Sea through the long North Sea Canal. Amsterdam is intensely urbanized, as is the Amsterdam metropolitan area surrounding the city. Parks and nature reserves make up 12% of Amsterdam's land area. Cityscape and architecture. Amsterdam fans out south from the Amsterdam Central Station and Damrak, the main street off the station. The oldest area of the town is known as De Wallen. It lies to the east of Damrak, and contains the city's famous red light district. To the south of De Wallen is the old Jewish quarter of Waterlooplein. The medieval and colonial age canals of Amsterdam, known as Grachten, embraces the heart of the city where homes have interesting gables. Beyond the Grachtengordel are the former working-class areas of Jordaan and De Pijp. The Museumplein with the city's major museums, the Vondelpark, a 19th-century park named after the Dutch writer Joost van den Vondel, as well as the Plantage neighborhood, with the zoo, are also located outside the Grachtengordel. Several parts of the city, and the surrounding urban area are polders. This can be recognized by the suffix meer, which means lake, as in Aalsmeer, Bijlmermeer, Haarlemmermeer and Watergraafsmeer. Canals. The Amsterdam Canal System is the result of conscious city planning. In the early 17th century, when immigration was at a peak, a comprehensive plan was developed that was based on 4 concentric half-circles of canals with their ends emerging at the IJ Bay. Known as the Grachtengordel, 3 of the canals were mostly for residential development: the Heringgracht, Keizersgracht and Prinsengracht. The 4th and outermost canal is the Singelgracht, which is often not mentioned on maps, because it is a collective name for all canals in the outer ring. The Singelgracht should not be confused with the oldest and innermost canal, the Singel. The canals served for defense, water management and transport. The defenses took the form of a moat and earthen dikes, with gates at transit points, but otherwise no masonry superstructures. The original plans have been lost, so historians, such as Ed Taverne, need to speculate on the original intentions. It is thought that the considerations of the layout were purely practical and defensive rather than ornamental. Construction started in 1613 and proceeded from west to east, across the breadth of the layout, like a gigantic windshield wiper, as the historian Geert Mak calls it, and not from the center outwards, as a popular myth has it. The canal construction in the southern sector was completed by 1656. Subsequently, the construction of residential buildings proceeded slowly. The eastern part of the concentric canal plan, covering the area between the Amstel River and the IJ Bay, has never been implemented. In the following centuries, the land was used for parks, senior citizens' homes, theaters, other public facilities, and waterways without much planning. Over the years, several canals have been filled in, becoming streets or squares, such as the Nieuwezijdswolburgwal and the Spuy. Expansion. After the development of Amsterdam's canals in the 17th century, the city did not grow beyond its borders for 2 centuries. During the 19th century, Samuel Sarfati devised a plan based on the grandeur of Paris and London at that time. The plan envisaged the construction of new houses, public buildings and streets, just outside the Grachtengordel. The main aim of the plan, however, was to improve public health. Although the plan did not expand the city, it did produce some of the largest public buildings to date, like the Paleis voor Volkslied. Following Sarfati, civil engineers Jacobus van Niftrik and Jan Kaaf designed an entire ring of 19th-century neighborhoods surrounding the city's center, with the city preserving the ownership of all land outside the 17th-century limit, thus firmly controlling development. Most of these neighborhoods became home to the working class. In response to overcrowding, 2 plans were designed at the beginning of the 20th century, which were very different from anything Amsterdam had ever seen before: Plan Zuid and West. These plans involved the development of new neighborhoods consisting of housing blocks for all social classes. After the Second World War, large new neighborhoods were built in the western, southeastern, and northern parts of the city. These new neighborhoods were built to relieve the city's shortage of living space and give people affordable houses with modern conveniences. The neighborhoods consisted mainly of large housing blocks located among green spaces, connected to wide roads, making the neighborhoods easily accessible by motor car. The western suburbs, which were built in that period, are collectively called the Westerlijk Tuinsteden. The area to the southeast of the city built during the same period is known as the Bijlmer. Architecture. Amsterdam has a rich architectural history. The oldest building in Amsterdam is the Oude Kerk, at the heart of the Wallen, consecrated in 1306. The oldest wooden building is Het Houten Huis at the Beginhof. It was constructed around 1425, and is one of only 2 existing wooden buildings. It is also one of the few examples of Gothic architecture in Amsterdam. The oldest stone building of the Netherlands, the Morion, is built in 's-Hertogenbosch. In the 16th century, wooden buildings were raised and replaced with brick ones, During this period, many buildings were constructed in the architectural style of the Renaissance. Buildings of this period are very recognizable with their stepped gable facades, which is the common Dutch Renaissance style. Amsterdam quickly developed its own Renaissance architecture. These buildings were built according to the principles of the architect Hendrik de Keyser. One of the most striking buildings designed by Hendrik de Keyser is the Westerkerk. In the 17th century, Baroque architecture became very popular, as it was elsewhere in Europe. This roughly coincided with Amsterdam's Golden Age. The leading architects of this style in Amsterdam were Jacob van Campen, Philips Vingboons and Daniel Stalpaert. Philip Vingboons designed splendid merchants' houses throughout the city. A famous building in Baroque style in Amsterdam is the Royal Palace on Dam Square. Throughout the 18th century, Amsterdam was heavily influenced by French culture. This is reflected in the architecture of that period. Around 1815, architects broke with the Baroque style and started building in different neo-styles. Most Gothic-style buildings date from that era, and are therefore said to be built in a neo-Gothic style. At the end of the 19th century, the Jugendstil, or Art Nouveau style became popular, and many new buildings were constructed in this architectural style. Since Amsterdam expanded rapidly during this period, new buildings adjacent to the city center were also built in this style. The houses in the vicinity of the Museum Square in Amsterdam Oud-Zuid are an example of Jugendstil. The last style that was popular in Amsterdam before the modern era was Art Deco. Amsterdam had its own version of the style, which was called the Amsterdam School. Whole districts were built this style, such as the Rivierenbuurt. A notable feature of the facades of buildings designed in Amsterdam's school is that they are highly decorated and ornate, with oddly shaped windows and doors. The old city center is the focal point of all the architectural styles before the end of the 19th century. Jugendstil and Georgian are mostly found outside the city's center in the neighborhoods built in the early 20th century, although there are also some striking examples of these styles in the city center. Most historic buildings in the city center and nearby are houses, such as the famous merchants' houses lining the canals. Parks and recreational areas. Amsterdam has many parks, open spaces, and squares throughout the city. The Vondelpark, the largest park in the city, is located in the Oud-Zuid neighborhood, and is named after the 17th century Amsterdam author Joost van den Vondel. Yearly, the park has around 10 million visitors. In the park is an open-air theater, a playground and several horeca facilities. In the Zuid borough is the Beatrix Park, named after Queen Beatrix. Between Amsterdam and Amstelveen is the Amsterdam's Bos, the largest recreational area in Amsterdam. Annually, almost 4.5 million people visit the park, which has a size of 1 hectare and is approximately 3 times the size of Central Park. The Amstelpark in the Zuid borough houses the Reker windmill, which dates to 1636. Other parks include the Sarfatterpark in the De Pijp neighborhood, the Oosterpark in the Oost borough, and the Westerpark in the Westerpark neighborhood. The city has 3 beaches: Nemo Beach, City Beach, Het Steenenhoofd, and Blijsburg, all located in the Centrum borough. The city has many open squares. The namesake of the city as the site of the original dam, Dam Square, is the main city square, and has the Royal Palace and National Monument. Museumplein hosts various museums, including the Rijksmuseum, Van Gogh Museum, and Stedelijk Museum. Other squares include Rembrandtplein, Muntplein, Newmarkt, Leidseplein, Spuy and Waterlooplein. Also, near to Amsterdam, is the Nekkerveld Estate Conservation Project. Tourism. Amsterdam is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Europe, receiving more than 5.34 million international visitors annually. This is excluding the 16 million daytrippers visiting the city every year. The number of visitors has been growing steadily over the past decade. This can be attributed to an increasing number of European visitors. 2/3 of the hotels are located in the city's center. Hotels with 4 or 5 stars contribute 42% of the total beds available, and 41% of the overnight stays in Amsterdam. The room occupation rate was 85% in 2017, up from 78% in 2006. The majority of tourists originate from Europe. The largest group of non-European visitors come from the United States, accounting for 14% of the total. Certain years have a theme in Amsterdam to attract extra tourists. For example, the year 2006 was designated Rembrandt 400 to celebrate the 400th birthday of Rembrandt van Rijn. Some hotels offer special arrangements or activities during these years. The average number of guests per year staying at the 4 campsites around the city range from 12,000 to 65,000. Thank you for your valuable visit. Take care.